The soul's correspondence to whatever gifts God gives it determines their greatness. God sees each and every one according to their correspondence to the gifts God gives them. God does not demand of all souls the same response. This is a clear, solid, grounded Catholic and Christian teaching, and it's founded in the Bible as well. Remember where Jesus spoke of Master giving more stripes, meaning lashes, to a person because they knew but failed to act upon God's will that they knew, and giving less stripes or lashes to a person because they did not know the Father's will and failed to do it. So here Jesus is telling us that with knowledge comes responsibility. With gifts comes responsibility. And without them, there's less responsibility.
Glory to God in the highest.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Everything Catholic again, and I really hope that you have learned so much from the videos I've put together for you here for the past few months. And likewise, I really enjoy putting the videos together to be able to learn together and discussing about what we've learned in the common area. So now, without wasting any more time, let's get started with this one. And just like what I have done for the past few videos with this approach, I've prepared this table of content for you to make it easier for you to navigate through the video.
Which is reminiscent of the Native American Indian culture. I'm not talking about pantheism where they worship creation, but the form of respect for nature and creation, because they see within itself the extension of God's divine being. We are reminded of the simplicity to which the divine will invites us. God all around the world is speaking to us. Even in this age of darkness, there is God everywhere. He is in the light that touches our eyes. He is in the air that we inhale and exhale. He is in the space between one step and the other. He is in the ocean's waves. He is in our neighbor. He is in our suffering. He is in the person who is in prison, in the hospital. He's everywhere in that sense, you see. And God, therefore, is waiting for us to acknowledge Him in all things. So prayer is not simply a repetition of petitions presented to God. Prayer is also an appreciation and an instruction occasion in the school of God, whereby we passively observe and imitate what we observe that is all around us. We see the sun and we learn from it. We see the beautiful blue skies and we learn from it. We see the creatures like the birds and the other animals and we learn from them. This is the simplicity and the humility that God asks of us if we are to live in His will. And the world is our instructor. Of course, there are different levels of instructors. You have God, then you have the magisterium, then you have, of course, your parents and your teachers, and then you have nature. And the more man learns to respect the world around him, the more its resources and potencies are available to him in his service to God and to all creatures. And this is why Pope Francis penned that beautiful encyclical on creation, right? And of course people were arguing about whether global warming was caused by man or by nature. I'm sure both are the causes, but no one can actually prove which is more one cause than the other. Scientists can prove, certainly, that certain elements impact the environment more than others. But what the Pope is conveying is that we ought to all respect this planet, not just this planet, but all creation. Remember, in the Garden of Eden, God said to our first parents, "Multiply and be the earth's steward." That's the word used in Hebrew. The poor English translation is dominated. That's not what it says in the Hebrew. Dominate sort of means like you can consider yourself superior to it in such a way that you lose the respect that is necessary or that God put within creation itself. Whereas steward means you are superior to it. Yes, of course, creatures serve us, we don't serve them, but we respect all things in God inasmuch as God made them as instructors to us, okay, and to serve us in our need. Once man grasps this fundamental truth, God opens his eyes to a reality that stood before him in the days of Adam, where he beholds the Creator's handiwork in every creature, where he cultivates and shepherds the earth as God intended, and where he gives back to the earth for what he receives. It is in gaining respect for the earth that man gains respect for all life around him. For God fashioned nature, creation, the cosmos in such a way that it takes very good care of man. It provides for man, both physically and spiritually. And by its example, trains him to care for all creatures.
And moving on to the next clip, it's going to be on this point highlighted by Father Iannuzzi, and that is no one is saved alone, and no one is damned alone. Please listen to this.
And this humanity that Jesus assumed enclosed within itself a kingdom for each creature. And Adam was aware of this. Adam knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jesus was to come to earth, the Son of God. He may not have known his name was to be Jesus. There's no evidence that he knew that. Maybe he did, but we can only speculate. But we know for sure that this plan of the Son of God, the Logos, in which is a Greek term, Logos spermatiko is like the word of God that proceeds from the Father, was to come to earth and become incarnate, to become the head of the human race. While there was no original sin, Adam was aware that Christ would come to earth. Now we call him Christ. Maybe Adam called him the Logos, or the Son of God. But the point is that Adam was aware that the second person of the Trinity was to assume his human nature. Now how do we know this, that Adam knew this? From approved prophetic literature and from some of the writings of the Church Fathers. We know that Lucifer knew this for sure. In fact, St. John taught this to Irenaeus, and Irenaeus taught this, that Lucifer was given by infused knowledge in heaven foresight that the Son of God would become a human and not an angel. And Lucifer, well aware that angels are far superior to humans in intellectual prowess, would not follow God's plan. He would not serve God's plan. And for that reason, there was a war in heaven, where God allowed an inferior angel to Lucifer, about 5 ranks lower than Lucifer, to defeat him, namely Saint Michael. And Saint Michael, therefore, according to the writings of Anne Catherine Emmerich, along with the other angels, took the places of these angels who had fallen. Do you suppose that Lucifer in the Garden of Eden did not suggest something like this to Adam or Eve? We don't know. But we do know that Adam had infused knowledge. And we know from Genesis chapter 2, verse 16, that God told Adam, not Eve, but Adam, that if he partook of this forbidden fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, he would certainly die. There was no question about it. God used the adjective certainly die. There's no two ways about it. And yet, they bought Satan's sales pitch. What did Satan say to Adam? If you partake of this fruit, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God. Well, silly Adam perhaps failed to acknowledge that he was already like God. That's what Adam means, who is like God. Well, Michael means who is like God. That's the word Michael, Michael. And the answer is Adam. Adam means like God. From the earth, but it also is understood as unto God, or like God. This is the equivocal meaning in the Hebrew and theologically. So Adam knew that he was a prince of this world, and that he was supposed to eventually hand the reins over to the king when the king came. And that king is Christ. That's the word he goes by when he returns in Revelation, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And remember what Jesus told Adam and Eve to do until he came? He didn't say until I came, but he implied that when he said this: fill the earth and be its steward, be its keeper, take good care of it. Why did God say fill the earth? Because that means that the earth has a terminus. Once the earth would be filled with little Adams and little Eves, then what would happen? Then Christ would come. So Adam had that knowledge already. That's why he was given that statement, fill the earth, because there was a purpose for filling it, and that purpose led to Christ's return. Nonetheless, this kingdom that Christ, when he assumed a human nature, enclosed within himself, was chock full of merits that were pre-existent and that were impacting Adam even in Eden before Adam sinned. And this kingdom was made up of all the divine acts of all humans that all humans were to have accomplished if Adam had not sinned. These divine acts of Christ were formed within his humanity, whose human will took possession of the divine will and not vice versa. The divine will of Christ dominated his human will. And his human will offered no resistance. It had no sin, it had no inclination to sin. But my brothers and sisters in Christ, please continue to pray for me, and I will continue to pray for you. This is how God made Adam and Eve, and this is how God made the members of his church, his mystical body, in solidarity. No one is saved alone, and no one is damned alone. There is a blessing and a curse for this solidarity, mystical component of the church. This solidaritas, this mystical, this ecclesiological component of the church is predicated upon unity of its members. As St. Paul says, when one member rejoices, they all rejoice. And when one suffers, they all suffer. There is a spiritual network in which we are all connected, all caught up. So we are obliged to pray for each other. It's not an option, actually. We're obliged by virtue of our vocation as our neighbor's keeper to help each other, to pray for each other.
And moving on to the next one, it's going to be a much shorter clip, and it's going to be on the era of peace.
Saint Pope John Paul II's encyclical, dedicated to the third Christian millennium, which affirms that Christianity is on the threshold of a new springtime that brings with it, in quotes, a rediscovery of the Church's holiness, unquote. Now, what does the Pope mean by that? And what it means is a rediscovery of the gift that Adam and Eve possessed. This is what this expression of Pope John Paul II means. A rediscovery of the Church's holiness is nothing other than a rediscovery of the holiness of the complete act that Adam and Eve enjoyed in Eden, that has been suspended for 6,000 years and has been imparted to this generation, the most blessed in all human history. I would go so far as to say this generation is more blessed than even the future generations. Why do I say that? Because they will not have as many tests as we have now. We are going through the greatest battle in mankind's history, which will never be superseded ever again, in its intensity and its duration. And because of that, there's greater holiness. The greater the challenge, the greater the prize. And this battle that we are experiencing now will yield an abundant harvest, a new era in the life of the Church, a springtime of Christianity, whereby Satan will be enchained and God's kingdom will reign on earth as in heaven. Now, this is not millenarianism, but this is really what Our Lady refers to at Fatima as the era of peace, which she promised she would also help Jesus impart to the world, when she said many nations would be annihilated, but in the end, I will give to the world an era of peace, and my Immaculate Heart will triumph.
The next one is more accurately a reflection shared by Father Iannuzzi, so it's not really that long of a clip, but it's quite packed with a lot of good reflection points.
This is indeed the greatest generation in the history of mankind, inasmuch as this generation, apart from all the rest, has been given the greatest gift of all time. How about that? We can consider our generation at one and the same time the worst and yet the greatest generation ever, because we are given the greatest test and yet at the same time the greatest blessing for those who pass the test. We are living in times of great confusion, ecclesial confusion, theological confusion, moral confusion, political confusion, great confusion in all areas, a confluence of confusion. How do we know what the right path to take is, if not by sound Christian principles imparted to us?
And I would also like to include this one. It's a little bit on parenting, and something that I feel a lot of young parents in our society today need to pay more attention to.
And this is how she loved everyone in the divine order. And this is one of the problems with a lot of these affluent countries. The parents spoil the children to the point where they become vicious. They start living a life of vice. They so spoil them that they don't know how to sacrifice, don't know how to earn a living in honesty. And this is a real problem in today's culture. And some of the excuses that, oh, I never had it, so I want to give everything to them. Well, that's fine, but don't go overboard and turn them into a little monster. So there has to be a certain amount of reserve and boundary when it comes to divine love. You can't just give them whatever you want. Otherwise, so.
And as we have just celebrated the Feast of Divine Mercy, I would also like to include this one on St. Faustina. Please listen to this.
There are certain things all of us do not like: foods, places, people. We cannot help that, really, and we cannot change that as far as our feelings are concerned. But by putting love in the will, we can change it. For then our will is subject to God's will, who commands us to love those we do not like. Saint Faustina was struggling one time in the convent with a nun. He told her, "My pupil, have great love for those who cause you suffering. Do good to those who hate you." To which Faustina replied, "O my divine master, you see very well that I feel no love for them, and that troubles me." Jesus answered, "It is not always within your power to control your feelings. You will recognize that you have love if, after you have experienced annoyance and contradiction, you do not lose your peace, but pray for those who have made you suffer and wish them well." This comes from entry 1628 of the Diary of Mercy. Remember, Christ loved us as yet we were sinners. We oftentimes don't do that. In the writings of Louisa, Jesus reveals to her that our love must be first and foremost toward each other, then toward other creatures, then toward the sun and the moon and the stars. Humans have priority over irrational creatures. When someone offends us, we are quick to say, "You've lost my love," or "Change, then I will love you." Jesus, who lived in the will of God, always turned it around and said, "Love someone, and then they will change. Do not make their betterment a condition of love. Let your love be the creation of their betterment." It is this Christian agape love that far exceeds all other loves of all other irrational creatures. It is the love of the sons of God whom St. Paul in his letter to the Romans describes as the agents that set this great cosmos of ours free from its slavery to corruption. It is an evolution of love. We do it by submitting our wills to the loving will of God, by following him throughout the cosmos and all the creations he made for love of us, by requiting his love in all things. For this reason, Louisa, every day, would go into the sun and thank God for it.
Well then, that will be all for the video this time. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. And hopefully all of you have learned so much from this video. And remember, if ever you have any feedback or suggestion, please let us know in the comments below. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your continuous support, contributions, and prayers. And until the next one, thanks again for watching, and may God bless you.
Remember, to God there is no time, but to us there is. We must forge our loyalty on the anvil of trials and tests and difficulties. This is what's known as the cross. All inconveniences are the cross of Christ that we are asked by God to offer up, while impacting for the betterment of all creation, every thought, word, action that it was ever made, of all creatures, even motions of all creatures. For the soul's complete act is the complete act of God himself.